Okay, let's get started. There's a lot of information to go over today. My name is Corinne Waldow. I'm the Economic Development Director for the Boulder Chamber, and I want to thank you for joining this week's Retail, Personal Services, and Limited Healthcare call. There are updates not only in some of these industries, but also updates about our county and where we're headed, and maybe the things you've read in the news about recent outbreaks within Boulder County that we'd like to talk about today. Please put all your questions in the Q&A feature, and I will be launching a poll later on to get your feedback as well on the face covering order that's coming to a close, possibly in Boulder County or maybe extended. So we need your information and input for those decisions. At this time, I'm going to hand it off to Jesse Rounds with Boulder County Public Health.
Thanks, Corinne, and thank you everyone for joining us today. And I just want to thank you and my colleagues for coming in today. So we are doing the weekly updates for retail, personal services, and limited healthcare. Let me go back here. We're going to just do a quick update on where the public health order is in its evolution, a little bit on the outbreaks that have occurred recently, then jump into updates on future changes before we go to sector news and Q&A at the end. So just quickly on the timeline, we just had on Friday the 19th the 7th revised public health order published, and as part of the lead up to that release, the governor did mention that there would be a future move to what he called protect our neighbors framework, and that does not have a release date yet. At the time, he said likely early July, but no further information has been released regarding that at this time. So just really quickly, you've seen this slide many times. The Safer at Home framework is still in place. And Protect Our Neighbors would just be an evolution of that. It's not going away. The need to continue to see our opening in the lens of what's happening with the virus is still there, because we do not have a vaccine, we do not have treatment, and we don't have herd immunity. And it will be months before we get to a place where any sort of significant change is likely. And that's because COVID-19 is still as contagious as it always has been. And that's also why compliance with these orders is obligatory for all businesses. Just a reminder that we put in all these presentations that if you have a question that falls outside of sort of the general guidance and you have a specific question about how your proposal meets with the public health order guidance, you can contact an attorney. Also contact the Boulder Chamber. Corinne has mentioned that there are some resources available if you do not have access to an attorney. One moment while my computer's having all sorts of excitement right now. So face coverings, and this is an important issue that we're really trying to get at here, and that is face coverings are an important part, along with social distancing, of how individuals can protect each other from the spread of COVID-19. You really need to bring it with you if you go out. Take it with you wherever you go. That way, if you are in a situation where you can't maintain 6 feet of distance, you can have a mask. We also encourage you to encourage others to wear masks. This is not about shaming people. This is about educating people. And that's why we've provided this face covering guidance on our website for employees as well as patrons. And it's actually broken down by jurisdiction. So if you're in a city, we've got that information as well, not just the unincorporated county. And finally, the face covering script is something that we brought out a couple weeks ago. It's really intended to help you work with customers who may not want to wear a mask to enter your store. If you want to provide services to them but can't let them enter, this script goes over some ways to have that conversation in a positive way. So in terms of information that you can access to help you understand and navigate this, covid19.colorado.gov and our website, boco.org COVID-19 business are great resources for basic general information. The CDPHE website, covid19.colorado.gov, has all of the latest public health orders and guidance, and they update it as quickly as they can. These other resources are really intended to help you communicate with other businesses with whom you might have something in common, and you want to try and figure out how other businesses in your industry are responding to COVID-19. And then Energize Colorado is a great resource for materials and information that you need to comply with the orders. So a little bit more about that 7th revised order. We're talking today about retail, limited healthcare, and personal services, as well as pastoral services under personal services. And those have been, if there are updates to those fields, they are located in these appendices within the 7th revised order. And the reason I'm guiding you to those appendices is we are actually going to be removing the checklist from our website that we created early on in the response, because at this point we're duplicating a lot of the efforts that the state is making, and we don't want to create confusion. So we're asking you all to go to that website. And so our website will link to these sources of information. And a caveat here that I like to raise, and I raised in the last one, is if you hear something from us, then go on the website and see a difference, or read it and say, that's different from what Boulder County said, check the revised order itself. Check the text of the document. That's where we're getting our information. And the reality is that websites take a little bit of time to update, and there are a lot of pages. And so updates don't happen on the websites as quickly as we'd all love. So definitely check the text of the revised order in these appendices if you have specific questions about differences in what you've heard. I just want to jump to outbreaks to talk a little bit about the outbreak that happened a couple weeks ago and the continuing impact. You'll note that this goes up to Thursday, and this is it's a chart of the 5-day running average of new cases in the county. And there's obviously been a huge spike. That's likely to be the most new cases we've seen on the 18th there since this started. There were some other days with high numbers, but those were, we were still getting our reporting and testing capacities up to the level they are now. And so there was some backlog. And so the day upon which they were reported wasn't necessarily exact. They were reported on these days. And so we just saw the biggest numbers, and that's worrying. We've got 3 confirmed active outbreaks at this time, 3 suspected clusters. We resolved 2 outbreaks recently. And this is really to just sort of highlight how much we are working with workplaces. In the last couple weeks, we've worked with 45 different workplaces, 6 within the past week, to address possible outbreaks and outbreaks. And that's really what we're looking to do. If you are a business who has 2 employees who test positive or are suspected of testing positive, you're having an outbreak. And we're there as a resource to help you stay open while our epidemiological team works with your employees who are sick to help them be safe and take care of themselves. And we make sure that we're tracking where the virus went. So I brought this slide up because I really want to point out that we're having an outbreak right now, and the county and the businesses are working together to resolve that. And so I just want to thank you for that. In terms of outbreak enforcement, I think it's really important to note that the outbreaks that occurred in the city of Boulder, and particularly on the Hill, as the newspapers have all pointed out. And we actually had great cooperation from both the city and CU in terms of addressing this for the future. The city has issued an executive order to amend their public nuisance definition, which will allow us to, and allow them to more quickly respond to this sort of thing. In terms of CU, they're looking at modifying their code of conduct to affect students now, but also as we head towards the fall, we're going to have students coming back, and we need to make sure that they come into the community understanding the importance of following the public health orders, following the mask orders, and working together as a community to limit the possibility of future outbreaks and further spread. And just a little bit of background, if you're interested more in this, definitely check out this Daily Camera article. It'll be linked in this presentation, which Corinne will send you, and we've got a lot of information there. It's definitely worth checking out. In terms of our future phases, protect our neighbors is the next phase. And the governor announced it last week. The announcement came with a website, a couple details. The most important thing for us right now is that communities must apply to enter Protect Our Neighbors, and these communities must meet certain criteria. And while Protect Our Neighbors is still draft at this stage, there's no guidance on what's going to be in it. And we don't actually know what all of the thresholds will be for being included in Protect Our Neighbors. Because of the outbreak, there's a possibility we won't be able to qualify when it first is brought out to the state. And I put here proposed to start in early July. That was the governor's projection last week. But as I said, we haven't seen any new details. And so I don't know when that will be coming out, but we do know that it does require us to apply, and that we are likely not qualified at this time. And that also holds true for our variance request. A couple weeks ago, we started the process of requesting a variance. Unfortunately, because of the outbreak, we got great feedback from all the businesses about how we could write and couch our variance, and the good the whole that would occur for the whole community. But because of the outbreak, we don't meet the thresholds to apply for a variance. So we are continuing to work on that variance in the event that we do meet that threshold again, and in the event that we need a variance. It's possible that Protect Our Neighbors will address a lot of our concerns, and we won't need to apply for a variance, which would be great. It would be nice for everyone in the state to be on the same level. With that, I'm going to jump to specific guidance by sector, and lucky me, I get to start out first talking about my sector, and that is limited healthcare. And there weren't any really significant changes in limited healthcare, but I wanted to highlight three items that are in the public health order right now. And really it's about what practices need to be doing in order to, again, address things like outbreaks. So in the event that there is a surge or resurgence in COVID-19 cases in our community, and we are ordered to reduce the number, or reduce or stop the number of voluntary elective surgeries, practices need to have a plan for that. You need to have a plan for canceling or reducing the number. How do you decide which elective surgeries go forward in that case? And this goes to the point that it's something I'm gonna sort of step back here and say that one of the dangers of these outbreaks is not just we won't be able to move forward to protect our neighbors. But if an outbreak becomes serious enough, we may be pushed back to stay at home in order to protect the community. So being prepared for that is really important for every business, but particularly in limited healthcare, that's a request that the state has for practices. Another thing that I think is really important for outbreak tracking is that practices should maintain a detailed log of patient interactions. Who's coming into your office? How long were they there? Which employees did they interact with? So that if an outbreak occurs, either in the community or in your office, you're able to help contact tracers and our epidemiological team track that, the possible spread. The other thing that I wanted to bring up here, and it's a change for limited healthcare as well as personal services, is as of last Thursday, practitioners must wear a face shield as well as their medical grade mask if they are performing a procedure during which a client cannot wear a mask. So this is a huge change for a lot of our practitioners who've been told that you cannot do work on someone if they are wearing a mask. If they are not wearing a mask, my apologies. The state has now lifted that, but has increased the level of PPE required. So the old PPE rules were everybody has to be wearing a mask all the time, and practitioners, employees need to be wearing medical grade masks as well as gloves whenever possible. And the gloves is just the whenever possible, the mask all the time. Now they're saying if you have a client who cannot wear a mask, or for a procedure that doesn't need to or can't wear a mask and needs to do a procedure, you have to wear a face shield along with your medical grade mask. And with that, I will turn it over to Cami for personal services.
Thank you, Jesse. Hi, everybody. It's Cami again with Personal Services. And so I'm going to reiterate a little bit of what Jesse said with a slight twist, but one of the guidance changes that also came out last Thursday for you all was in the non-bolded language. That's what the order has said now kind of since the beginning of Safer at Home. The bolded language is now new, which is saying between customer and employee stations, there needs to be a minimum of 6 feet. And while we've been recommending that as a best practice, as we were sort of surprised that was never a requirement from the beginning, it is now. And I think that speaks to the fact that the virus rates are not necessarily going down. And so to try to kind of keep those social distance spacing between clients and customers and staff, this is now a new requirement, is that there needs to be a minimum of 6 feet between spaces where services are being provided. The next change on the next slide is what Jesse mentioned before, is about the masks or face coverings. Previously it did say at all times. Now it is saying that employees who are performing services on clients who have their masks removed must wear a face shield, and that needs to be provided by the employer. And that the difference is you don't necessarily have to wear a medical grade mask, but it is being encouraged, strongly encouraged, that the staff have a medical grade mask as well, but a cloth face covering can still be used to render those services that for a while now have not been able to be allowed until last week, where masks could be removed. And that just the additional piece is that the face shields that now are required to do any sort of work on anybody removing their own personal mask needs to be disinfected between clients. And I'll just reiterate what Jesse says, is that the masks need to be worn into the location as well as put on immediately once the service is done. Masks need to go on, but they can temporarily come off for the service to be provided. That's it. Otherwise, when walking through the facilities and coming in and out of the facilities, regardless of whether it's limited healthcare or personal services, masks need to be worn sort of in and out to kind of limit that potential greater increase of transmission with masks being removed. And this was what we talked about last week as potentially guidance that they had asked for feedback on Tuesday. It is now part of the official guidance. This is, I know, is a confusing area for some people, but basically, if you are DORA regulated, and those of you who are in their upgrade or in their FAQ online, they sort of have a nice definition. It's on page 4, 5, and 6 of the DORA guideline. It outlines what services are allowable and what aren't, who follows the Colorado Board 800 rule, but it basically is talking about the same thing. Essentially, masks can be removed by clients, and the difference between when you have physician sort of oversight, as it was prescribed or asked for by a physician, versus when it wasn't. And if it was asked by a physician, or you're under the preview of a physician, you follow the limited healthcare guidance in general. And if you don't have a physician kind of guiding the treatment, you are now still able to do it without a mask. You just need to follow the personal services guidelines. But DORA has some good examples of how to kind of define or figure out which set of guidance you're supposed to follow, as well as they now have additional language about the face coverings and the face shields, and additional explanations, or just additional guidance on the new changes. So there's that. And I know for, well, I'll get to it in a second. This is what, of all the calls and the emails that we're getting into the Boulder County Public Health Call Center, the majority of what we're seeing for personal services is really around mask issues and social distancing issues, either by staff who are not wearing them correctly. And just to remind everybody, pulling the mask down and having it hang below the nose or hang below the mouth is not mask use. And we're getting a lot of calls and complaints from the public saying staff are not wearing their PPE correctly. Even though we may not have called you back yet, we'll probably get to you at some point to give you that feedback. So just kind of as a mass reminder and mass education, please, please, please ensure all staff at all times are wearing their masks correctly. If you're on a break and you need to pull them off, sort of remove yourself from the common spaces and do that. But when you're in service areas where services are being provided, the public are noticing who is or isn't wearing their masks, and they're complaining about it. So just as a reminder, as a kind of that co-ask between us and you to just reinforce those sort of healthy, correct mask wearing practices. We also get a lot of complaints about masks not being worn by clients, which we know is out of your control sometimes and not much, but anytime you have a chance to just maybe politely or correctly just encourage someone to have proper mask use and not pull it down below their nose or mouth as well, just to reinforce those good practices, that would be great. And then we're getting a lot of calls about staff and clients also not social distancing in the workplace and when services are being provided. So really watch those workflows, people sitting down or maybe laying down or in eye shot of someone else receiving services are noticing when things are not happening correctly, and they're calling and complaining. So that has really been what the most common issues are for the last few weeks now. I think most of you are doing a good job of getting your areas set up, but we're still getting lots and lots and lots of mask complaints by staff and by clients, as well as staff not social distancing. So that's in your control. So managers and other staff work together to hold each other accountable for those pieces. Next slide, Jesse. Oh, I just wanted to sort of spotlight, and I don't know, Jesse, if you can pull this up or not, but I wanted to say, even we talk about those DORA guidelines a lot, and even if your business specialty area isn't brought up in these weekly webinars, I know for a lot of the tattoo artists or a lot of the personal service, like the movers or some of the other places that don't necessarily get guidance called out by sector, we still think a lot of the DORA guidelines might be worth checking out, because a lot of them can still give you good ideas for best practices, even if you're not necessarily a salon setting or a massage setting. But for those where you have clients who come in and out and they're receiving a service directly from someone, so the tattoo parlors possibly, or the body art, you might find a lot of great ideas within the DORA guidelines, even though you aren't necessarily regulated by them. So we just wanted to share that these resources are there. And again, like Jesse mentioned, the update happened on Thursday. A lot of that DORA guidelines didn't necessarily get updated until Friday or Saturday even, so it's taking a day or two once the changes are official to post online. But this is a website, and I'll just point out, we're under the barber and cosmetology, as well as under the chiropractic and massage services. That's where they have a lot of these DORA kind of FAQs that we have posted on our Boulder County website to reduce confusion. We'll just link you directly to these places instead of having similar guidance in a different handout. We're trying to simplify things and point you straight to the state resource. This is what it could, just so you're familiar, this is what it will look like. And you know you found the right page if you find this. And by day, all the latest guidelines will say like June 9th. And that's where you can find, again, a lot of those further explanations with a lot of either direct recommendations or those you can apply as best practice. And I think that was it for my updates right now. I believe we might be kicking it over to Maciel next. I may have one more slide, Jesse, I can't remember.
I think it's me, actually, Cami. Angel.
Oh, okay, sorry, kicking it over to Angel to do retail.
Oh, nope, sorry, I was wrong, Maciel.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Maciel Leon, and I'm the person that you would be sending questions to in regards to places of worship and rite ceremonies. And like Cami said earlier, we're pretty much everything is on the state website with all the information, and nothing has changed in this regard. We're still the state is still asking that churches and places of worship keep their indoor capacity at 50% or up to 50 people per room. And from the questions that I've been getting, a lot of you are doing an excellent job in taking into consideration the space, how to navigate that, and how to really follow the guidelines in a way that is keeping everyone safe. Social distancing, still 6 feet between household groups, individuals and entrances, exit directions when seated and also in restrooms. And once again, the questions that I've been getting and the planning that I've been getting from a lot of places of worship have been doing an excellent job in making sure that, there is one entrance, one exit, that people are not congregating in one specific space, and that services are being held in such a way that people are able to be 6 feet apart, if not a little bit more, and that the appropriate guidelines are being met so that people are remaining safe while, enjoying their service and whatnot. And of course, when it comes to cleaning, it is recommended that after every service, all surfaces, restrooms, any place where your community was in, for that to be cleaned thoroughly, following the CDC guidelines, and to have those, allow proper time for cleaning. We recognize that it's been very difficult for everyone to keep pivoting with all these changes and guidelines, and that, it may cause some, disruption in terms of what your normal service times are. But just please keep in mind that as you're following all these guidelines, to stagger your services. That way you have enough time to not only acquiesce by what needs to be done, but also give you and your staff the time to clean and to set up for the next service. And that way everything is not so rushed, and you allow the proper time to reset for your next group. So like Cami and Jesse were saying, I mean, the big thing is for everyone to follow the guidelines that are being set by the state. We don't want to see, we're seeing, as we've seen those reports of more cases being reported, but we would like to do everything in our power not to encourage any type of thing that would cause a huge spike. Because as we all know what happens with that, and we just want to be able to stay safe and continue enjoying the allowances that we've been given thus far, but by following the guidelines that we have in place.
Okay, thank you, Maciel, and thank you, Cami and Jesse. So I'm Angel Bond. I'm the retail liaison, and I will be just going over a couple of points on retail. There haven't really been many changes to retail at all, but one thing that I do want to highlight is that under the previous stay-at-home order, there were retail businesses that were previously deemed critical. So places that maybe sell automotive parts or thrift stores. And then when there wasn't as much guidance for them during that time, but then as we switched to safer at home,
there was more guidance for retail that was open to non-critical and critical retail. So what we're finding is that some of those critical retailers, they didn't get the memo. They didn't get the updates as we moved, because they were already operating under stay-at-home and never really had to set up shop differently under safer at home. So I just wanted to highlight some of the high level guidance for them and for you all. So one thing that we talked about under the safer at home was having a flexible or remote scheduling. So what this really means is that if you have some of those people who are stocking the shelves and doing inventory and things like that that don't need to interact with customers, see if you can move those to different times of day so that you don't have as many people in the store or in the establishment. If you can, have any of your office staff do remote scheduling so that they're still working from home. Keeping in mind that retailers need to stay at 50% capacity of their establishment, or maybe at a lower level if that's what's needed in order to maintain that 6-foot social distancing. So by being able to move the people who are not customer facing and not interacting with people to either a different time or a different location to do their job, you're increasing the number of customers who can come into your establishment. Additionally, what we're finding is some of the automotive places didn't necessarily install the plexiglass shields. So keep in mind that installing those shields between customers and the employees when they're not able to maintain that social distance is really important, especially at the cash registers. So if you have a cash register, you need to install the plexiglass shields at those points where it's impossible to really be able to maintain 6-foot social distancing. Also, just thinking of those cash registers, you also want to try to do contactless payment if at all possible, and just think about that whole payment process and what those touch points are, seeing if you're going to need to disinfect the pins that they're signing the receipts with, setting up procedures. I know we've talked about this before, but having a jar of clean pens and a jar of dirty pens so that when people use the clean pens to sign a receipt, they can put it into the dirty pen jar, and then staff know to clean all those pens at one point and one time so that you're not continually having people touch those. Additionally, we want to highlight the importance of disinfecting high-touch areas. So what high-touch areas there are in retail are really, the door handles, the touch pads when people are paying, also carts and baskets that people are touching. So you want to disinfect those high-touch areas after each customer interaction so that people don't spread the virus that way. Additionally, you want to set up your establishment in a way to where you avoid gatherings. You don't want to have waiting areas where people wait to get their tires or whatever. You want to, and if you do have to have people waiting for items, you want to ensure that they're 6 feet apart. Also, a crucial part in avoiding gatherings is really having clear signage, which is also required. So you have signs at the entrance of your establishment, and you have signs throughout reminding people to remain 6 feet apart, also reminding people to wear masks, and then also having floor decals on the floor so that people don't stand too close to each other. We're also finding that sometimes those signs, we're kind of getting inundated with all of the signs everywhere that we go, and people aren't reading them as much. So keeping in mind that having another way of communicating those social distancing requirements or mask requirements to your customers is really important. So if you have a PA system, think about doing routine announcements saying just a reminder for everybody's safety, stay 6 feet apart, something like that. Or else you can also have people at the entrance of your retail establishment just reminding people when they come in, thank you for coming in today. We just want to remind you that it's important to everybody's health and safety if you stay 6 feet apart from people. Another thing that retail that were previously considered to be critical and under the stay-at-home may not have gotten the memo on was the symptom monitoring protocols. So it is the responsibility of employees to stay home if they're exhibiting symptoms of COVID. Also, you need to have those symptoms monitoring protocols in place. So people have to do those symptom checks and the temperature checks before they come into work. You can either have people do it at home and just email in or submit a form saying what their temperature checks are and their symptom screening, or you can have somebody, a COVID coordinator in your office place who can coordinate all those symptom screening protocols. So just wanted to remind people that there may have been some businesses that were previously considered critical and they were open and operating. And then when we switched to safer at home, they didn't necessarily get all of the updates on how to set up their retail establishment according to the newer guidance. So that's pretty much all I have.
Oh, I might
Nope.
take this one if you want.
Okay,
I just wanted
sure.
to share a shared resource across for everyone. And I just want to go back for the personal services folks or even the limited healthcare. If at all possible, just as a reminder, for any work that is being done around the face with the mask being removed, it is suggested, strongly suggested, if you can do it in a separate room versus out kind of that general shared space, much preferred to be done in a separate room. So just a reminder. But there's now a new social distancing calculator that's also on the state website. So Jesse, if you want to show it real quick, we can just demonstrate it. I think it's kind of poorly or maybe confusingly named at this point, but it's really a social distancing calculator to help you assist how many employees and customers you can have in your facility and stay within the minimum or the maximum recommendations for the current social distancing calculations. And we'll let Jesse pull it up. But in short, it allows you to put into your, oh great, here we go. So just looking at the pictures real quick, the difference is it's factoring in how can you pass people safely and maintain 6 feet. So that's where the calculation is based on using the 12-foot grid, which is on the right side of the screen. Versus if everybody stays 6 feet apart, you can't safely pass one another. And so the calculator below allows you to put in, your total square feet. So I don't know, Jesse, maybe put it, 5,000. And I think just show if you have 25% of your facility is covered by furniture or equipment, it's going to spit out a number that says, you might want to consider 26 people max. And then you need to go back and look based on your setup, does that make sense? Can you adequately social distance with that many people? If you bump it up to like 50% of your floor space is covered with displays or products, it's gone down to 17 people. If your space is still 75% of your space. So this is the idea is you can use a sliding scale to get a better sense. So even though the recommendations are saying 50% of your max capacity, or you might have a number based on 50 people can be in your space or 10 people can be in your space, whatever it might be. This calculator was designed to help you figure out based on your total square footage and what floor area is being occupied. So this is, they took the Boulder County website or calculator that we've been talking to you about, and they've now basically kind of just rebranded it, and they're now sharing it across the state. So this is very similar to the space calculator that we created just for Boulder County, and it's now being shared statewide. So we just wanted to let you know here, use this kind of as a starting number, and just know you might need to go backwards even further and reduce your max number of people in your space between clients and staff. And just above, it says for indoor and outdoor events, but it's really meant to help you, like the first sentence says, for employees and customers. So I think there's kind of a naming challenge there. It doesn't necessarily make sense for indoor and outdoor events, but or it's not just for indoor and outdoor events. It's to be used by any of you could use this calculator, and hopefully that will help you. So if you haven't done that yet, you might want to consider going back and reviewing. Are we hitting kind of the right numbers based on our sector? So that was it. Just wanted to make sure that's now new on the state's website.
All right.
Yeah.
I think just to close out the presentation part, I just want to remind everyone of the session that you're in now, that we're going to continue to have those sessions. And then Wednesday is still the time for the Latino Chamber Spanish session. And that is a rotating topic each week. So definitely check in to see what the topic is for this week, but also if you're interested, there are all of the presentations from the last couple weeks are saved for your review. And then the other piece of information or news is that we are canceling the Thursday talk back session. Apparently no one wanted to talk to Corinne and me, which is sad, sorry. So if you have questions, this is your time to do it. So please definitely ask questions. And with that, I think the important thing is this is our group email address. If you have a question, if you have a concern, email us. It will go to the right person on our team and we will get back to you. If you call our call center, two things. One, it gets to us in the same way. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer for us to respond. We get a lot of comments, and so it just takes us time either through email or phone to get back to you. And then the other important piece of news is that starting at the beginning of July, after the 4th of July holiday, our call center will be reducing hours from 9 to 5 to 9 to 2. So we're expecting to be able to serve just as many people. Having great questions come in there, but we want to recognize that we are trying to respect the time of all the folks that have been working in that call center and give them some time to do their other jobs. So with that, happy to take questions.
Thanks, Jesse. While we're taking questions, I'm going to launch the poll for those people on the call so that you can answer that while we're answering your questions. So Angel, this is for you. This person apologizes if this was covered, but are gloves still required for retail customer interactions?
So I didn't cover that today, but yes, according to what I see under the Safer at Home, because we haven't had changes specific to retail that I've noticed, it does say wear gloves and face coverings or masks during customer interactions and whenever possible during other work activities. So yes, it still is required.
Okay. And then we had another question. It's that we have a new viewer today. So woohoo. Actually, I think we have a couple. The question was, are these meetings available by recording? Because normally they can't attend live. And one thing is, every single one of them has been put onto the Boulder Chamber YouTube page. And I send direct links to all the previous recordings for the combined sessions, for individual retail, for individual limited healthcare, and for individual personal services that you can watch. I have to say that this session alone was watched more than any others, the personal services, just because you cover so many industries. You know, we could have 100 to 200 viewings a week on this particular session. And overall, people have been watching because we've had over 3,000 views of these webinars. So I think that's important knowledge, is that this is important information. You can look back at previous ones, but know that the most up-to-date information will come out in the most recent one. In some cases, Cami, for example, went into very big detail under the Safer at Home, and in this time she just highlighted some of the changes. So you might want to look back at previous ones.
Reiterate that if your business sector isn't called out in these webinars, that's only just because there wasn't any specific changes, but all the general guidance and all of the general recommendations or best practices still apply to everybody who falls under the sector. And that's what you can find on the state resource that we give every single week, as well as, you know, some of the other ones. So even if we don't call out your specific business area by name each week, you're not being forgotten about. It's just you didn't have any specific changes called out for your specific group, not that you're intentionally being ignored.
Yeah, appreciate that. And I think one of the things to note is this is one of the harder ones. You go from dog groomers to massage therapists to, you know, religious services to, you know, estheticians and spas. So I think just within personal services, and then limited healthcare is additional. So All right, so there's a question about what's the reasoning behind two different sets of rules for massage as personal services versus limited healthcare? The interaction seems to be the same between client and therapist, and you have that same physical contact. What's the difference? Why were they called out differently? Maybe Jesse, you can talk about this since you're in limited healthcare.
Sure. I mean, the original reasoning was that was sort of two big issues or two big items. One was under limited healthcare, the thought was that in many cases, the therapy was being provided under the direction of a physician. And that sort of led to the second part, which is they had those practitioners had access to more advanced PPE. And that's really, as you can see in the difference between the guidance for doing work in the area covered by the mask, in limited healthcare, they're still requiring that you wear medical grade PPE, whereas in personal services, it does not say that it has to be medical grade PPE. The face mask, face shield is the same, but the PPE requirement is different. And that's really what it came down to. And I think originally, again, part of it was they wanted to cut down on elective procedures. So they were trying to, under the early parts of Safer at Home, they were really trying to limit the number of elective anything that was happening. So they wanted to limit massage and acupuncture to medically required activities, and I think that's changed. Cami, would you?
Yeah, no, so I think the person who asked the question, is a great observation, is that, right, in practice, the practitioners in these fields aren't necessarily going to be operating very differently. It was originally meant as who is the treatment being prescribed, essentially, and that the folks in the limited healthcare field, we might have been licensed differently and had a higher professional standard of required PPE in general that already gave them access, like Jesse said, to that PPE to continue services, where in the personal services sector, you might be doing very similar work, but you didn't have the original same requirements or access to those PPE. And then again, along the way, services kind of divided a little bit, but we sort of realigned the longer that we've come into Safer at Home again, is that the practices are looking very similar again. Just different professional level requirements of PPE is really the biggest difference at this point. But very keen observation that in practice, the services aren't necessarily functioning very differently.
Thank you. So I think anybody in the Boulder area has read the news and seen the chart that Jesse, you presented earlier. And the idea in a lot of businesses' minds were like, oh, that's over there. Those are the youth. Those are, those people over there doing that. But in a lot of ways, it does affect the businesses on the call, our entire business community. And maybe if you could talk a little bit about how it affects and ways that we can, as the business community, step up and take action to assure that we are communicating the requirements and ways to mitigate mitigate the spread of the infection.
Sure, and this has come up a couple times in the different sessions, and I think actually Cami has some really great ideas about how to target information about this stuff. But I think the real message that I want to get out to businesses is that you have the opportunity to meet with, to interact with people from across the community, and putting out positive messages about mask wearing and about or facial covering wearing and social distancing just reaches a larger population than if I say this in a session here or we put it on our website. You're interacting every day. So the signs that you put up that are produced by the Boulder Chamber that educate people about why we're asking for this and how to comply is really important. And I think Cami really hit on this in one of her slides, and that is like another thing that is really that is really important about your level of interaction with your customers is addressing things like correct and incorrect ways to wear PPE. Like Cami said, having your nose hanging out doesn't protect anybody. And so those sorts of little behavior modifications really have an impact, and it's sort of a modeling behavior. But the other thing that I think is really important about businesses is that you have employees of all ages, you have customers of all ages, and communicating to your employees, particularly, that wearing PPE, wearing your masks, and social distancing outside of work is also really important, because for the majority of their day, they're not at work. They're interacting with other people outside and bringing in whatever they've had to deal with all day. And so it's sort of trying to address at work and at your business the sorts of behaviors we want to see outside all the time. I guess that's really my message. Cami, Angel, and Maciel, if you have any additional thoughts, yeah, we can use it.
You know, I would just add that we appreciate, we've heard from a lot of business owners how you feel when you have the public come in and not follow mask orders, and how you feel it's risking your business being open, or your other clients feeling uncomfortable, or your staff feeling uncomfortable. So just kind of reiterating that message of sort of that joint kind of community kind of call to action, just to reinforce proper mask wearing is only going to help all of us get out of the safer at home phase quicker. It's going to help all of you remain open, because we definitely don't want to go backwards. And that, though we know there's definitely opinions about this all across the board, but sort of that, even if it helps sort of angle it for someone who thinks it's ridiculous to be wearing masks, they're entitled to their belief. But even if it's like, but it helps us stay open. So if you want us to remain open, you know, please just follow it as a requirement for us. And we don't want to shut down. We barely just got started. I don't know, whatever the messaging might be, but just kind of that collective ask to reinforce social distancing and mask wearing is going to help go a long way, because we hear it from you how frustrated you are that other people aren't following rules either, even when you're trying, and we know you're trying. So, you know, we hear it, and we join you, and, you know, feel for you and have empathy and sympathy for that, because we know it's not that everyone is disregarding the rules, and we know a lot of the community is following the rules as well, but those that are choosing to break it is making it challenging for everyone, and we recognize that on your behalf, because we don't want you to have to slip backwards if our rates keep going in the wrong direction. That's what we're all trying to avoid.
So thank you. You know, we've talked. I had a bunch of businesses call me last week, just concerned that what can they do to help get the message out there. And I think the point is that you interact with your employees, you interact with your customers, and just saying this is not only from, you know, this is for our collective health and our collective economy. It's from my business and the business next to me, that we continue to follow these requirements, and we follow safe, you know, safety protocols. So I don't see any additional questions. This is recorded. Oh, all right. So here's a question. This always happens, right, when I'm about to close this one. So are clients able to take their masks off when they're face down during a massage or acupuncture treatment, or just when they're face up and work is being done?
I can answer that question, Cami, if you don't want to.
Okay, I would say I have the massage therapy thing pulled up too, so I can
Okay, so go ahead then, if you got it.
Well, I was say you start and I'll pull it up in case we need to look at it.
Okay, I mean, I would say the guidance is that you can take the mask off when you are doing work on that portion of the face, not any other time. That's my understanding. Cami, if the guidance says different, I haven't seen that yet.
It does say still, but it may just be that it needs to be updated on the DORA site, that for the face cradle, that face cradle cover should still be used at all time. In between appointments, dispense of the used cover, clean and disinfect their face cradle, which you would probably be doing anyway. But that, oh, here's the question. While doing work on a client, can a face rest in a cradle? Are they still required to wear a mask? So it is answered directly in the massage therapy DORA guideline. Is
And
it
the
possible
answer
to
is,
allow the client to take their mask off while they're face down and then put it back when to turn them over? And the short answer is no. Even if the cradle cover, the covered mouth, I think this is one of those things where it might not be updated yet.
So you think it might have changed that they're allowed to take their mask
It
off?
might be, might be one where we need to call DORA and just double check. As of now, the DORA guidance online still says no. Masks must be worn for the entire duration of the service, which we know that has now changed. So I'm thinking this just hasn't been updated yet, since we know masks aren't necessarily required for the duration anymore.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the newest order did allow for people to not have a mask on. It just added those extra layers of a mask and a face shield.
And then face
for
shield,
the person
yeah.
performing that.
So this is the perfect example of how all the state documents just don't magically get updated all at the same time, but it will. We're pretty sure it will. This will be on there. But that question is on the FAQ already, and so expected to get updated.
so
Thanks,
we
Karen.
will, you know, if there is an update that comes in or someone, I've been so thankful. We've had, anytime Dora sends an update or something, they've been forwarding it to us. And then those people that didn't get it right away or used to seeing an email from me, we're getting updates as well.
Yeah,
So
thank you. Because sometimes the pass through from Corinne is faster than us getting it even ourselves. So thank you all for sharing when you get it.
yes, so thank you for sharing. And we also got to thank you for reinforcing that, you know, that we're all part of a community, and seeing people out without masks, you know, there is a portion in which you as a business can, you know, what you do inside your business, but also just reinforcing that community aspect of social distancing and mask wearing, because it affects all of us. I'm going to close this down because we have to move to the next session, but I want to thank everybody. You'll get a follow-up email from me, and keep attending because things are changing, and we saw last week already several changes. Things are changing. It doesn't always change for your industry, but it will continue to move in a direction and hopefully forward moving as we go on. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.